This question is for President Stith. And it's that this is the first time many of our Small Business Center directors and staff have had the pleasure to hear you speak and get to know you. We've had a lot of turnover in the last couple of years since you were with us in that fall conference in 2019. So to get the conversation started, I have 2 questions for you. Please share with us how your background and experience fit in with the work the Small Business Centers do, and then tell us how you see the Small Business Centers supporting or fitting in with the 3 pillars in your one system vision for the NCCS.
Sure. I think one thing, just on a personal note, that some people may not know, that my parents started a 2-year business school in 1956. I always make the joke, that's many years before I was born. I read about it. And so I came from an environment that valued entrepreneurship and higher education. And so from my formative years, I understood the value of small business. As Ann has mentioned, and as many of you know, if you fast forward a few years, and in my role as SBA director, working hand in hand with our small businesses across the state of North Carolina and understanding the value that they have. When you talk about job creation, it's small businesses that create numerically the largest number of jobs in the state of North Carolina. We certainly welcome the Toyotas to locate in North Carolina or in the Triangle, Apple and Google. Those are extremely important. They continue to fuel the job engine. But when you look at the numeric statistics, it's small businesses within our communities that are the key, and that's my orientation. So, as I said, while I may be biased towards small business centers, I understand that it's not only a good business proposition. I understand the key role that we play in our communities, as we play in the broader sense with our community colleges, providing that foundational higher education for individuals in our community. So for me, I didn't have to study up on it, and I didn't necessarily have to go to school on it. I've lived small business all my life. I've had the opportunity, and this probably prepared me, as Ann mentioned, I served 8 years on the Durham City Council. I owned and operated a preschool for 11 years as a part of one of my entrepreneurial ventures. That prepared me for politics. Because when you work with 2- and 3-year-olds, and then you go to a city council meeting, or you go to the legislature, you see some of that same behavior. No one wants to share. It's mine. I only have the best idea. So not only understanding, as Ann mentioned, what it means to meet a payroll, to have not only the welfare of my family in the balance on how I'm operating my business, but the individuals that are my colleagues in that private business, I understand it. I've worked for 2 governors, and I've been very focused in business, whether it's creating a small venture fund for startups or ensuring that we have diversity in our purchasing and contracting opportunities. That was experience I had in the 80s. I've been on multiple sides of the table as an entrepreneur, as a policymaker, as an elected official. So I just feel blessed to have the type of background that helps me understand the small business and the impact, as you mentioned. I saw the tag on our table, are we one of the top 10 states with lower taxes? I understand what those regulations do, or tax policy, what impacts they'll have on our small businesses. Because it's not just tax policy, it's policy impacting the individuals that are working. And there's a balance. Obviously we need to fuel our basic services. But so for the first part, I think, it's been a life experience to be able to be at this point in my career. And for me, candidly, while it's an excellent professional opportunity, serving as a president of the system at this point is really personal for me. It is about what we can do collectively for the state of North Carolina. How can we ensure student success? How can we ensure our small business success throughout our communities? And how you align with as you just heard, my 3 pillars. I think on all of them, each and every day, when you talk about ensuring that we're the first choice for accessible and affordable higher education, you're engaging with the public each and every day. Unfortunately, many times when I meet with people across the state, they may say, oh, well, you're the best kept secret in North Carolina. The community college is great, best kept secret. That's not a good thing. We want to amplify our message. We need each of you to be spokesfolks for the community college system. You're engaging with business, but you're also aware of the vast majority of opportunities available on our campus. And you're day in and day out focused on our economy and ensuring that we're not only recovering, because we'll recover. North Carolina is a resilient state. We're a resilient people, so we'll recover, but we want to grow. And you're going to be on the front lines of that. And as I mentioned earlier, speaking to just how your daily activity aligns with my strategy for the system, it's your unique experiences, the diversity that you bring to your role each and every day. That's important, and that, all states can't claim that, and that's why we're winning, and that's why folks are coming to North Carolina, because of what we have and the values that we have here in the state. So I think those were your two questions.
Yes, you did very well. Thank you. So Dr. Hinshaw, the next question is for you. For a number of years, you've been very engaged with entrepreneurial efforts in support of Western North Carolina. Can you share a little about those efforts and what you believe the impact of those efforts might be?
Absolutely. And I mentioned the short rows a while ago. I was raised on a tobacco farm in Yadkin County. That's how I know about the short rows and how happy I was to see them coming. But when you think about entrepreneurs, it's a mindset. It is a mindset. And you all know of individuals that you can see pretty quickly if they're going to be successful or not. Because on the farm, if something breaks, you got to fix it. And on the farm, you don't quit until you get done. And that's a mindset that has carried me throughout my career. And I got my start in continuing education, which is where most of your areas reside, and was passionate about what we did in those markets. But I was always disappointed about the status and value or undervaluing of the small business center, because it was like that was something that was down there in an office, and it was one person and wasn't really engaged. And so when I became a president over time, I said, we've got to change that. We've got to bring that small business center up to the top. And the only way that happens is by connecting the dots with the president, to the curriculum programs, to the continuing education programs, and making sure that entrepreneurial mindset is a part of everything that we do. Because that may be the greatest thing that we do as an educational institution, teaching people how to think, how to be persistent, how to understand how to get over obstacles when they're faced with them. And so about 2009, I started looking at opportunities nationally for how do we change this undervaluing of small business centers in this state. And so I pursued the Ewing, Marion Kaufman Fund, which was out in Kansas City, a fund that had really never gone out of Kansas City, and they were very Kansas City centric. And when we approached them to take a look at what we could do here in North Carolina, I think it took them back a little bit, because we had so many opportunities with our 58 colleges and our 58 centers, and they invested in us. And this guy sitting beside of me took a chance with me, and we started the Innovation Fund North Carolina from a grant with the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation and some of our own skin. And we invested in small businesses. And a lot of those businesses have been extremely successful all over the country. And from that, we said, what's next? We can't sustain always, because our margins are so slim at our colleges, we can't sustain this. So what is next? So I connected with NACI and started working with Becky and them on their board. Then I had the opportunity to connect with NCIDEA. And I said, I want to serve on that board. It's about that awareness and elevating what we do in these markets, because the small business centers are so critical to every aspect that we do within our college, every aspect. And if you're not connected into these programs, and Gary Muller, he and I started the first Shark Tank here back in the day, which then turned into a county-wide event. If you're not taking those chances and not taking those risks, then we're not being very entrepreneurial in our own minds. And so being able to do that and connect the dots and leverage opportunities, and Jeff knows I send him chasing after every grant that's out there, no matter where it's at. And a lot of times we're lucky and we get it because Jeff does a great job with it. But it's also an investment in our community. And the return on investment that we create through what you do every day is critical to this state and each one of your local communities, especially if you're working in a rural area. Small businesses better be successful in our rural areas, or we're going to see the rural areas dry up. You see the population demographics, the projections on the decline in the rural areas. Small business centers can be that foundation for keeping those communities and those towns and those areas alive. That's so important to this great state of North Carolina.
I will tell you, I don't have to be as politically correct as President Stitt does, so I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, you've got the best president in the whole state right here. And I mean that sincerely, and I think one of the reasons, if you look at the entrepreneurial mindset that he has, it's not just for supporting Jeff and the things that you do here. He takes that to everything he does, and that's represented by, I call it the Taj McGarrett, but it really reflects on what you're doing. I think secondly, my two colleagues here, the thing that came to my mind over and over is that we're so blessed to be in a place, in a world, in a country, in a state, to where we have people like yourselves that take the best of opportunity, and you're always, it's a life of discovery. It's a life of fulfillment. And when you go out and help people see what they need to do or can do to pursue their dreams, there's nothing that supplants that. There's nothing that replaces that. You have the opportunity to do that every day. And so it's not all the bureaucratic elements that go with the large businesses and so forth. They are all supported in many respects by many small businesses. I didn't fulfill the responsibility that you said earlier, but I remember back during the day when I know you don't believe this, but I was actually younger than anybody in here at this time. But my friend, we went to work for a construction company in Gainesville, Florida, is where I'm from. And, I went my way, he went his way. It was a number of years later that we passed each other, and I learned that he's that multimillionaire you're talking about because he went to work for W.W. Gay, but he ended up owning W.W. Gay, which is a major contractor, in the Florida area and so forth, in HVAC and plumbing. My point being, you have at your fingertips the ability to help people see that every single day. I'm really proud. Everybody knows Scott. I'm going to embarrass him over here. I'll pay for this, believe me. But he helped when he was in a different capacity to help. You're going to love this name, Garrett. Dirtbag Ale. I said, what in the world? It's like my other son when he was taking a class in college and it was wine appreciation. I said, of all the things that you could be taking out there, wine appreciation, I had no idea it was that serious. So Scott helps this guy. I was out there by that facility about 2 weekends ago. They had probably 1,000 people out there. And from that little operation, they grew a new concept to where they have multiple entrepreneurs out there every weekend, that probably thousands of people, Scott, would be out there doing that. That's what you have at your fingertips. The ability to help people fulfill and see their dreams, and then with ongoing assistance, assist them in fulfilling that promise. We just got our information back. Well, we've been looking at it. I think you were I know you were with us when I gave the presentation to the legislators. We bring in about $85 million a year just to our college and our county. Guess where the majority of those people who we fund to do the services and the manufacture and so forth of the things that we need? It's small business. It's not big business, it's small business. And so when you can localize it like we have the great opportunity to do with the Small Business Center Network and make sure that it counts in our respective communities, then we've done something special. And as I look out here, I see 100 counties in North Carolina represented here. Think about that, 100 counties representing 58 community colleges. Not every state has that. We do. And you are the outreach of what is so good. I'm so honored to work with Garrett. We saw things that were really, really interested and forward thinking. Some of those things that we see are common names now. Some of those things that we saw in the medical community that came out of that, by the way, are being applied right now to soldiers wherever they are. And by the way, not just soldiers, civilians, in terms of medical devices that they use to do the things they do, not to mention drones and everything else. You've got one of the most interesting jobs in the world, because you get to see some of these things when it's just an idea, when it's just a concept, when it's just a perceived need, and then nurse and nurture those people to the point where they're able to take advantage of what's available to them. And there's no one better that can help you with that than these gentlemen here as you go forward. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
It was a great story. Thank you for adding in. That was perfect. So, President Stitt, next question. We've been through a pretty tough couple of years. I think everybody would agree, and yet we've been very resilient, and a lot of great things have happened, and we're still smiling, and we have that entrepreneurial mindset. Tell us, how has the pandemic changed the priorities for the system office? How has it changed the way we do things?
Yeah, that was going to be my point. I think our priorities remain the same from a system perspective. Ultimately, it's student success and ensuring that we provide a pathway to success for our students, certainly through the small business centers, that you're providing a pathway for small businesses that you're working with in the community. But we've all had to be very flexible over the last 2 years. As I mentioned a moment ago, you know, how many of us could spell Zoom a couple of years ago? Or Zoom meant something very different than looking at somebody and say, oh yeah, I think I recognize you now. And so from a system perspective, we've learned how to innovate, we've learned how to be flexible, but that's the hallmark of the North Carolina Community College system. That's our competitive advantage as well. We're able to meet not only the needs of business and industry in a very flexible manner, we do that for our students as well. So during the course of this pandemic, and President Hinshaw mentions one critical area in our rural areas, in the role that community colleges play in the rural areas, we were able to use federal funding to continue the expansion of broadband to our rural colleges. And we're completing that over the course of the next year. That's just not important for our students and our small business centers located at our community colleges. That was impactful for the communities they serve. Because once you saw that deployment in some of our rural community colleges, you know, looking out at this beautiful vista now, you see some of the cars in the parking lot. Some of those cars were not just students, those were people from the community coming to the campus to utilize that broadband that had been expanded in those rural areas. So what we've had to do as a system is continue to build upon our foundation of being flexible, being nimble, meeting the needs of the market, whether that's student, whether that's industry, and we're continuing to do that as we look forward. And we were chuckling, maybe not so chuckling, at some of the dynamics that we see in higher education now, and I've participated in panels like this with my good friend Peter Hahns of the university system, and Superintendent Truitt, and Hope Williams, who's president of the independent colleges and universities. It's very interesting, the discussion that goes on now. They are talking about adult learners. They're talking about workforce development. And I just sit there smiling, patting my foot and say, you know, and they're talking about affordable higher education. And we've already figured that out, and we're doing it. And so as we look at the changing dynamics of just the marketplace in general, I feel very relieved and feel very comfortable that the community college system, whether it's working with a newly minted high school student or working with small business in the community, we're exactly where we need to be to meet the needs of North Carolina businesses, to meet the needs of North Carolina students, because we understand you have to be flexible, you have to be nimble. We are living in a global economy now. We're impacted and still working through a global pandemic. We're properly positioned to meet the needs of the people that we serve. I really believe, like no other higher educational institution, and that includes our engagement. If the data that both Ann and I outlined, what you were able to do over the last year is phenomenal. And that shows how we're able to respond to a very dynamic marketplace. And it's going to continue to be that way. It's, again, as we were talking earlier, you look out over the next year or 2 and 3 years, it's going to be very different than what we're dealing with right now. We have to start planning for that now so that we continue to lead in the future.
So, thank you. Okay. All right. So, Dr. Hinshaw, I have one for you. How has Catawba Valley Community College responded to serve businesses since the start of the pandemic?
Good people. Jeff Newell and our team, just when this thing first hit, there was none of us that had been taught how to deal with this situation. Yes, we had pandemic plans and we had all this stuff, but we didn't know what in the world we were doing. I felt like for the first 2 weeks there in March, when it hit and things began to shut down, I was breathing out with straw. And then I realized, hey, everybody's looking at me to do something here at our college. And so I turned to Jeff and I turned to the other team members and said, listen, we've got to pivot now. And the R3 program was amazing. The Everyday Entrepreneurial Adventure Fund that Jeff has been working with has made a difference, but it was about that can-do rather than, oh my goodness, the sky's falling. The sky had already fell, and we were just participating in it, and it was about changing that mindset away from this is how we've always done it, which I say are the most expensive words in higher education. If you're saying that and you're doing what you did 5 years ago, you run the risk of being obsolete. So it has to be a focus on what's next, and sometimes people call that chaos. They call me Captain Chaos here because I'm going to throw something new into the mix right when we get comfortable, because I don't believe in people being comfortable. I think when you get comfortable, you get complacent. But the work that we did in working with our partners, and that's the big thing I want to emphasize, it is about partnership. There's not one entity when it comes to successful small business startups that brings the silver bullet. It is the multitude of entities that we have. We have over 3,000 assets in this state set up to support small businesses. How does the farmer or the person in Ashe County get access to those same assets that exist in Raleigh and Charlotte? We have to connect those dots, and the commitment to doing that is what really drove us out of that panic mode and into a successful sustainability mode, working with our chamber and our Economic Development Commission and thinking about things that we had not been doing that we needed to be doing and placing emphasis on. And thanks to Jeff Newell and his team, we were able to transition that very quickly.
Thank you.
I think about the word as I've heard my colleagues speak here, and it's adaptability. How many of you ever heard the statement, the glass is half full, half empty? Anybody? I think it is what it is. It's half full sometimes, it's half empty depending on how you define it, but I choose to define it this way. We've got half a container that's full of water and the opportunity to figure out how to fill the other half. And so that's the adaptability that we're talking about here. And it doesn't have to be the new greatest idea, the greatest breakthrough in medicine, or the greatest breakthrough in computer science or anything like that. Sometimes it's just sheer fact that you know your businesses in your area well enough to know that you can bring value to them in one way or another, or at least give them an ear to hear when they're trying to bounce ideas off. And so the point being is you acknowledge that half-empty glass. You've got to. That's the reality. But at the same time, and what you have here, and my colleagues have said this, is that it's a situation where you've got to go in then and say, okay, how do I fill the rest of the glass? That's the beauty of what you do and the world that you do it in. As President Stitt said earlier, most of the jobs come from the small business sector. Most of the ideas come from the small business sector. Although we spend literally billions and trillions of dollars worldwide on research and doing things, some of those things come out and come to fruition. But most of it is that man or woman, or sometimes that child, that will go in there and have an idea, and in their basement or their garage or whatever they're doing, will go in there and try to figure out a better way. And they do it, and it builds and it builds and it builds. You see, it's trying to figure out how to fill that glass with that empty part of the glass with more water. I think that can be done. I'm going to embarrass my friend sitting next to me here. When he first came in, I think you were greeted, if you recall, with a sinkhole. Now I'm from Florida. I'm from North Florida, and I know what sinkholes are. I fished in them. I've seen them before, and so forth. But in North Carolina, give me a break. And so I could talk to Garrett from time to time and say, "How in the world are you having a sinkhole in your place?" And then I asked him one time. I said, "How much did it cost you to fix that sinkhole?" And I think you told me $1 million or something.
$4.2 million.
$4.2 million. And you know, there would be a lot of people who would give up on the future with a situation like that. Now, this is a new president, by the way, coming into an established campus, facing something that had not been faced before. It's the attitude, it's the outlook, it's the question, is the glass half full or is it half empty? Now, I think it's half full, but you have the opportunity to fill the rest of the glass, and you figure out how to do that with the people that you serve day in and day out. And only by doing that will our society be saved, will our economy be saved, will our country enjoy the prosperity that it deserves. And you have an important part to play in that. There's only one other state that I know of, and it's in the state of Oklahoma, that does what you all do here. And you cover every single county in this state. Anybody ever heard of the North Carolina Military Business Center? They do too. Many of you serve these folks. You work in concert with these folks. I'm going to give you a pop test. Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to embarrass you by asking you the question here, but I'm going to ask everybody else so they can help us out. I'm not even going to ask President Stiff.
Good.
You know, it's good. Anybody want to know how much they generated last year from businesses, primarily small? Any guess?
You're talking about their return on investment?
$9 billion.
9 million?
$9 billion with a B.
Billion.
And many of you were engaged in that. We had a meeting, and Lee, whatever his last name is, I can't remember.
Moritz.
Lee Moritz. He came in last week. We had meeting two gigantic companies that won a government contract, and some of those companies are not able to fulfill their schedules. And so therefore, here's the conversation with the big boys and girls out of the Defense Logistics Agency and others. They're in there trying to figure out how they're going to get what they need to serve their soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen. The conversation went around to small business. There will be another meeting to try to figure that out because it's real. My point being, the solutions are small businesses. And it might be cut and sew, it might be looms, it might be all that other stuff that they do. Lee's the expert, I'm not. But the point being, those opportunities are there. So sometimes we go chasing that stuff that's really sparkly and fancy and way far out there. We catch some of it. But the rest of that story is sometimes the answers are right in front of us if we just figure out how to do it effectively. And so that's what you all have the opportunity to do day in and day out with what you do to serve, and a system that is designed to help you do that. I have the same worry that Garrett has. See, I've been a vice president in 2 states for organizations like this. That was my first job when I came to North Carolina, and I left one like it in Oklahoma. To come here, I was the vice president responsible for the Small Business Center Network. Mr. President, I would encourage you to continue it being vital and a lot of support to support it, because these people make things happen. It might start out small this year, might be small next year, might be small forever, but it's that 1 or 2 people that have legitimate lives and livelihoods because of their effort and their work. And I think just as importantly, if not more so, the contribution to the community is such that it strengthens that community because it's an ingrained fabric of that community. That's the role you all play. I worry sometimes that people in your role tend to forget that. This guy and I, we have to go out there and we worry about people in curriculum. Oh yeah, it's important. I don't mean to say anything other than that. And we worry about these other things. But my golly, if we go out and we don't worry about the small business fabric in our respective communities, we're all in trouble. You have that import, you have that opportunity to move these organizations forward and move your communities forward.
Thank you. And I'm going to throw this next one out at all three of you, and you can decide who wants to go first. When you think about the Small Business Center Network, what is it that you believe we do best? What are we best known for?
I caught it. I used to play baseball too, by the way. I think it's the connecting of the dots, this type of organization where you all are building relationships and figuring out how do we leverage assets, and it has to be done at the highest level, because we all know that the Small Business Center Network is underfunded. And I'll say that to anybody, because it has always been underfunded and we haven't seen a lot of change in that. And so we've got to address that going forward. But it is about building those relationships so that when Jeff has an idea and somebody else, he doesn't know what to do with it, he can pick up the phone and call one of y'all and say, hey, can you help me figure this out? And it may be that, yeah, we just went through this same thing. That relationship and connectivity of the Small Business Center Network is the most valuable asset that you have in front of you. You have to grab that, you have to reach out, you have to build those relationships. You don't have to like everybody, but you need to work together. And that's the biggest point that I think would be the most value there. And we've done it at the president's level too, with some pilot projects that we'll talk about a little bit later.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
I think to build on that, not only the connectivity, not only on the campus itself, but within the community, and you understand the businesses you serve better than anyone. I think that's the advantage of having that connection to your various communities, understanding what that small business ecosystem may need, and as importantly, not need. That's the beauty of our community college system. We're serving, we have 58 community colleges, and they serve their unique communities. We have some common bonds, but you are daily on the front lines, understanding what the needs are of the businesses that you serve, and to me that's extremely important, because from Raleigh's perspective, we can't assume that one size fits all. We need to hear from the network, and we need to understand what are the various needs throughout the state. So for me, I look to, and certainly in colleagues in this room, to have a key understanding of what's needed in that specific community, and what does success look like for those businesses in that community.
And I think our small business centers definitely have a pulse on what's happening in their communities. They're just so close. It's one of the things that I think, we talk about our brethren in the SBTDC, and they're certainly very good at what they do, and they're our colleagues, but you guys really have that local feel and that local pulse in your communities that's just at a deeper grassroots level, I think. So, and it makes a big difference. And I think when you're working on behalf of your friends and neighbors and people you actually know in your communities, you feel such a deeper connection and dedication as a result of that. Dr. King, did you have any
I was just
thoughts
thinking of Kent Hill, and it's to me the most important thing is you're there. We can pontificate on high about what should be and what might be and all that, and we can do that. We can influence things where we sit, but most importantly, you're there. Now, I would really encourage you to do this. Make sure they know your name, kind of like that Cheers story that they used to have on TV, where everybody knows your name. That is extraordinarily important. And so engage with your community, know who they are, and more importantly, they need to know who you are. Don't think for a moment anyone, to include all of us sitting up here, knows everything. We don't. We know a lot about what we do, as you do, because the beauty of where you came from is you typically came out of the real world. And you came into education because you're giving back, or you're looking for something to do that really matters, and what you do really matters. But you're there. You're in church with these people, you're at the mall with these people, you're at the ball games with these people. They need to know your name, and they need to know what you do. And then the more relevant you become to them, the more known you could become to them, the more I think that opportunities will come your way to serve people in a way that you do. We're there. That's the secret of the North Carolina Community College System. We have 58 colleges covering 100 counties because we're in the same neighborhoods and the same communities they are. I will caution you, however, President Stith, you need to hear this one, okay? You have got, and he's the man who can help us. It is so easy for people like Garrett and me to get caught up in the grander schemes of things that go on in our respective communities, that even in your own colleges, if you're not careful, you can become invisible. Don't be. Your president needs to know what's going on in your area just as well as he does what the GPA and retention rates are in curriculum and college transfer. But if we don't tell them that, if we're not purposeful in going out and communicating that, then all of a sudden we become an afterthought, and then pretty soon if we're out of sight, we're out of mind. You can't do that. I would encourage you to stay engaged. Now, don't be underfoot to the point to where, you're a nuisance more than you are anything. I don't mean that. But the point being is we've got to tell our story, and if we don't tell that story well and consistently, we won't be remembered. We won't be appreciated. We won't be supported to the degree that we can. Now, President Stith, here's where you can help. I'm probably one of them, just like, I don't know if you've never done this. I know you haven't. You get so wrapped up in so many things that all of a sudden you say, whoa, I've got this small business center director out there. By golly, I bet I could slide them over into that curriculum area, or I could slide them over into this area. The funding comes to support small business center network directors doing what you're charged to do day in and day out. President Stith, you can help these presidents overcome. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. I might not be able to go home tonight.
Well, we can just all finish and go home now. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think, we made a big decision a number of years ago to put that laser focus on entrepreneurship and the activities of the Small Business Center, and, really sticking to working directly with small business owners and prospective business owners, and not training the employees of companies, and sort of staying in that lane where we needed to stay. And so I think it's very important that we don't get pulled into doing a lot of other stuff so that we can do what we're really meant to do.
President Stith is so gracious, because whenever I start to say something like that and I look over at him, he says, oh my God, what's coming now? But I do that because I respect him, and I think he does have the power to help us. And that will be one of the most difficult battles you fight on your respective campuses. And President Stith, we need to help them fight that battle, because the moment that they are dissuaded or distracted from what they're supposed to be doing day in and day out, the entire community loses, the entire community college system loses. And you're the only one that can help us with that.
Okay. I'll quote you at the next president's meeting.
Please do. I was impressed. You said you went back to 1956 there. You didn't go back to 1947. You'd gone back to 1947, I'd have been right with you, in terms of those dates. My point being, it's too important not to do it right.
Thank you. I've got about 3 more questions, and I think we have about 5 or 6 minutes, but let's see how we can go with this. So talk to us a little bit in terms of what you see as the biggest opportunity for the Small Business Center Network.
I think, for me, it's building on the success that we've had, in particular over the last year or two. The network has shown that we're an integral part in this state's economy, and you see, you pick up the Wall Street, New York Times, whatever periodical you want. It's the great. We have the example down the end. The great retirement, the great rethink. People are leaving their current employ, and they're becoming entrepreneurs. And so I think to position ourselves not only with our traditional small business owners and entrepreneurs, but that profile is very different now, and we're seeing people leaving traditional. And I know you're probably faced with that as well. And you mentioned that earlier. We're not immune to that at the system office. We've had the opportunity, because of the change, to bring new team members on. But I think you're going to see a different entrepreneur, and the small business centers are uniquely positioned to take advantage of those new entrepreneurs and to support them as they come out of traditional employment opportunities and want to continue to either have the flexibility they have now and to grow it. So I think that's one of the key new type profile for our entrepreneurs.
Great, that's perfect.
I think one of the biggest opportunities that we all have, and we all have to take ownership of this, is we have to tell our story better. And we have to base it on the data and the impacts. And we can't just say, well, I sent this report into the system office and that's my story. This needs to be told locally in your communities. And you're going to need help with that. You're going to need marketing help. You're going to need the president's support in your own local community to establish yourself as a key component of the value that a community college brings into these local counties. And so telling our story and how we frame that story and how we frame it as a system may be one of the most important things, because President Stitt said earlier, unfortunately, we are the best kept secret in North Carolina, and that needs to change quickly.
Kent Hill doesn't know this, but and I would couch it in this. And Kent, by the way, is my small business center director back there. You try to sit in the farthest place away from me as you do. But Kent doesn't know this yet, but I had two young ladies in my office yesterday. They were, 13, 14, 15?
13 and 15.
13 and 15, and their mother. They're immigrants from Mexico many, many years ago. These two young women came in with some ideas on what they were doing and they're already making money at 13 and 15 with what they're doing, and they've created a foundation that they're trying to help more kids with shoes and shirts and things of that nature. A 13 and a 15-year-old kid that are more advanced than many people I know who are 55. So my point being, making sure that receptivity is there to embrace all people, from the highest of the high to the ones that are most, I started to say immature, Mr. Chairman. That is not a good word for these people. They're probably more mature than I am. My point being is opening that door to a broader segment of our population so that they can take advantage of what we do. Now, again, President Stitt, that may have some implications in terms of what we can do, but now this is what Kent doesn't know. I said, did you see Kent Hill like I talked to you about last time? Oh, yes, sir. I said, well, what did he do for you? And they went through a litany of things that he'd done to help them and so forth. I said, okay, what did you do? And they got uncomfortable for a little minute, and then they said, well, we did this and this and this and this and this and this. And they're about to ramp it up to a higher level, doing some things. So always be able to go back, and I did not do that with subterfuge in mind at all, but I wanted to ask the question, what really happened as a result of that interaction? And I got a good answer. So my point being is that being there, being open, spreading that out and that opportunity up to more people. And Garrett hit it on the head. If we are not telling our story, it's not being told. We can't expect President Stitt and the system office to go in there and take responsibility for that. They can throw us a dog bone every now and then and help us with it a little bit, as they do. But the point being, that responsibility is ours and your local presidents and that local chamber of commerce and that local economic development group and those other groups that you work with out there. We've got to tell our own story. Keep in mind, over 6,700 people employed because of what you did last year, your last reporting period. Over 669 or 68 businesses created. Folks, that is no small deal. Who knows that outside this group? How many other presidents know that?
Very few.
No one, if any, maybe a few. I do read what Kent does. I mean, we communicate. But my point being, you got to tell your story. You say, well, I don't have a big marketing or promotional budget. Okay, so what? So what are you going to do? There's a thing called publicity, any non-paid form of mass communication. You've got a lot of people looking for stories out there if you still have a local paper. We don't have a very good one, but nevertheless, and because it's changed. Those decisions are made out of Austin, Texas. And the problem is that we've got to figure out how to overcome that, because that story needs to be told. There's a thing called social media. There's a thing called, major events. There are events and ceremonies in your respective communities. Tell your story. You've got a great story to tell. We're just not telling it enough.
Dr. King, thank you.
Could I throw one other
Sure.
thing in this? I want to encourage all of you to get to know your foundations. Most of your colleges have a foundation. We have invested out of our CVCC foundation close to $800,000 into small businesses directly.
Yep.
The return on investment that you all have the ability to create with the relationships you have has a huge value to your college's ability to find resources and get philanthropic gifts, to get grants. Leverage every opportunity you get. Don't just assume because this is your budget that that's what you're stuck with. Be entrepreneurs. Help us, let us help you find those resources, and even lie to you and tell them that we got them. We haven't got them yet, Jeff, but then we go get them. So I just want to encourage that, because I think a lot of times we don't think that way when we're thinking about what we do in this ecosystem.
That's awesome. Let me wrap us up, because I know we're really at the end of the session, but let me just ask you to give a 1-minute answer to this question. And then we're going to call it and take a break and go to the next session. So how can the Small Business Center Network best position itself to remain a valuable and relevant part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in North Carolina?
I'll do 10 seconds, because I know
Okay.
President Keene will need a little more than 1 minute.
That is the cheapest shot you've ever taken.
I've been nice all panel, right? I had to get one in before it's over. But having said that, I think you've heard it. To continue to not only do the good work that you're doing, but let folks know about it, because if not, it will. I think as we move forward as a system, it will be detrimental to what we're doing. If people are not understanding the success you're having and the role that you're playing in the state's economy, that's a disservice not only to the great work that you're doing throughout the state of North Carolina, but ultimately, if people don't understand the value you bring, it will make it difficult for future investment. So I think you've heard it from my esteemed presidents here, is to ensure that your presidents know, but as importantly, make sure your community knows.
Awesome. All right, your turn.
Strengthen the connection of the dots. 3,000 assets across this state. Don't limit yourself to just your local community. We can build access to that, but we all have to work together to do that. And that's going to mean taking chances and being a little risky in the way that we do business. But the more that we strengthen our partnership and leverage the asset that you create here in your local communities, the stronger this state and this network is going to be.
Perform and celebrate. Have very specific metrics on your success and recognize them for what they are. But when you hit them well, and you do, celebrate them. Let somebody know about it. And then be always looking forward to the next opportunity, always looking forward to not just the next challenge, but with every challenge comes an opportunity, a different way of looking at it. And if you do that, then that keeps your life exciting, it keeps your life fulfilling. And I think more importantly, when you're fulfilled and you're doing things that you love to do, you impact the people that you're working with in a very, very positive way.
Awesome. Thank you. Join me.